Hello and welcome back to the Astro Read. We are your hosts, Stella and Nayeli. The podcast is all about astrology, celebrity news, and how you can use astrology in your everyday life.
Welcome back to our current subscribers and hello to all our new viewers tuning in today. If you're new and like our content, please feel free to subscribe. Our goal is to reach 100 subscribers by the end of this year, and we're pretty close to it. And by continuing to gain subscribers, it allows us to continue making this content, and your comments help us get ideas on new episodes and what topics you're liking the best. So for today's episode, we are going to be discussing Ricky Martin, who has been in the news lately, in regards to, I guess, relationships, not necessarily relationships, but I guess sexual stuff he's been involved with. I honestly don't know all the details. It seemed like it kind of came fast and furious.
Yes, so I can go over the details.
Yeah.
So the breakdown is apparently, and this is just allegedly, so we have no context or connection with any of the people involved. We're just astrologers here giving you, for entertainment purposes, an analysis of Ricky Martin's chart based on the recent events that happened to him, unfortunate recent events. So anyway, my interpretation, because I'm a secret Ricky Martin fan, is not the bias is not present, I promise, guys. But no, seriously, he was, allegedly, he was taking advantage of or in a relationship with, it's not clear what's going on, with someone in his life who had on July 1st, I believe, filed for a restraining order because of domestic abuse and didn't really go through the police. I think he just went straight to court from the articles that we'll link below. And everything was pretty much wrapped up in like 21 days because he filed a restraining order, and then all of the news like rose to the top of the, curd of all the news, like everything was going on. What's going on with Ricky? Like, is it an abuse case? Was he, apparently somebody was saying that he was with a relative? Like, it was very strange, all the things. He's still married, so I haven't found anything about him being divorced. He welcomed his fourth child, I think, in 2019. Like, a whole bunch of stuff in his life romantically has happened in a positive. So, for this to come out, it was kind of like very strange because he's mostly under wraps with a lot of his personal life. And then finally on July 21st, like literally 21 days later, it was all just done. Like, there was no like anything. The court dismissed the case somehow, and there wasn't any allegation anymore. Like, it just seemed like something, I don't know if it was, and it was considered blackmail. That's what apparently they were saying, that this person was blackmailing him and trying to get money out of him. So, this is all alleged. I don't have any information directly from the source, honestly. So I'm not going to sit here and say I know all the facts, but this is what was reported. So we're just analyzing his chart, not just throughout his fame and his life, in fame, but technically, like, these 21 days are a key example of like how important knowing your astrology is because it's so reflective of the astrology. If I just go into it now and tell you, July 1st, the moon was on the cusp of his third house extended family. So again, those rumors about his family came up when the moon went into the third house. And then all of this ended. Oh, and also on the 1st, Mars was, I believe, either in conjunction with his Chiron in the 11th house in Aries or in the same house. I can't exactly remember. But once this ended, the moon was headed towards that triple conjunction with Uranus and North Node. So it was like in the 12th house of endings, of things coming to an end, things coming to a close. And the moon was also there. So I think this was very tied to that lunar cycle where things can go up and down, and you're sort of like, what's going to happen? What's going to be the problem that comes up? And obviously it was a very big problem for him because he doesn't have a lot of controversy that follows him, other than the fact, was he or was he not gay for most of the 90s and 2000s. And then he finally came out and it was like, thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the story.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow. Yeah. And I feel like it was like a lot in a relatively short period of time. So it's good to hear your interpretation of like the moon cycles and what was happening, because that could probably explain why it was like all of a sudden this information was coming out and it just seemed to kind of fade away just as quickly. I'm also a Ricky Martin fan, being a Hispanic kid, like
I've been to 2 concerts. Okay. Like, I have to be honest. I'm like diehard. Like,
Yeah, Die Hard. Yeah,
trying not to be like, I don't like Ricky. What are you talking about?
yeah. I haven't been to any of his concerts, so you beat me there. But regardless of the outcome and things kind of simmering down, I'm sure some fans and even non-fans are left wondering, is Ricky Martin really this nice guy that he comes across as being? You know, for anybody that is aware of Ricky Martin or has followed him as an entertainer and as a singer, he's just always like, he seems so happy. He's always dancing, you know, and he does a lot of philanthropic work. And he just seems like an overall great guy. I think the only part of like his career that's been kind of not as idealistic or kind of shaky was when, you know, the question of his sexuality came about and kind of him having to reconcile why he wasn't honest about his sexuality before, which a lot of people could understand is because, you know, the pulse of whether people, you know, that are gay are accepted in society and things like that. But other than that, like Ricky Martin has just had this very good guy persona. So looking at his natal chart, we can get some indicators as to whether this good guy persona is real or is it all manufactured by him and his team? I would say overall, he's a good guy. Like, is he perfect? No. And we can get into like some of his aspects that might make him a little bit, you know, aggressive or maybe a little bit over the top with his communication at times. But I think overall, he is a good person. I think he has a lot of luck with attracting people, whether it's attracting the public or attracting people in a relationship. But there's also indications in his chart that show that he could be prone to, you know, more open relationships. He needs variety in relationships. So whether that means there's variety in a monogamous relationship or whether he is, you know, prone to affairs, whether it is allowed in the relationship or not, that's up to him and his husband. I forget the husband's name, Yosef or something like that. And so, you know, that
Joanne Yosef. Yeah, you got it.
Joseph, yeah.
Joanne
So
Yosef.
that could lead him into potential scandal, but I don't necessarily think that makes him a bad person. What are your thoughts, Stella? Just like from a quick glance at his chart.
Just from a quick glance, I mean, he's got passionate emotions because he's got Mars and the moon conjunct in Pisces, the 10th house. So I would say he's fiercely protective of his career and like his image in his career, which is obvious. Like, hello, he hid the fact that he was, you know, questioning himself sexually for years and years and years. And there was always rumors. And even at the concerts I went to, everybody's like, well, for sure. And I was like, guys, like, can't judge him, like let him live his life, you know. But it's just like there is so many questions that swirl around him, and that really comes from the fact that Mercury is in Sagittarius in the 7th house. So there's a lot of communication around his love life, a communication around the mystery of his love life. Neptune is also there, so it sort of brings a cloud around how he communicates about his, you know, relationships and who he's with, etc. There's a lot of mystery around his love life. And, you know, it's compounded by the fact that, again, he's got Venus in Aquarius in the 9th house, the house of the explorer, the house of the adventurer. And it might be that it's more of like he's just open as a person and he enjoys just being an open person when it comes to whether it's his sexuality, whether it's his life, whether it's the things that he does in his life. You know, he's very open person. And of course, North Node is conjunct Venus, so maybe there's a lot of connection to his love life and how he is going to manifest his dreams, manifest how he's going to live his life throughout this incarnation, let's say. So, you know, that leads to a lot of questions about his sexuality, about what's going on. But again, fiercely protective of his image. And of course, it's not always accepted to be someone who is homosexual within certain communities, especially not within the Hispanic community, which I also happen to be a part of. And I'm just like, yeah, no, you didn't talk about this. Now people are bringing, you know, their boyfriends or their girlfriends home. And it's very like, oh, very new age, like, oh, this is what everybody's doing. But I know also many people who have, you know, left their families, who've been left by their families or kicked out of their homes within the Hispanic community. And, you know, under this sense, I won't talk about the religious aspect of it, but under this sense that abandoning your child is also the right thing to do if they won't do what you say and they're going to live a new life. So he had a lot of fear around it too. So of course, Saturn in the 1st house, there's a lot of worry. There's a lot of fear. Saturn in Gemini, there's a lot of thoughts around the fears you have of the things that you're doing, especially Saturn in the first house, at 0 degrees, it's going to make you a worrywart. It's going to make you really think about overthinking things and like how you plan things out. And so this unexpected event that happened in July was like, first of all, his fans were like, really? That sounds strange. Why does he need to abuse anyone? Why would he need to do that? He's never been called abusive in any of his relationships. So already we were already doubting. And then on top of everything else, you've got the fact that it's a lot of issues that are family related. So the moon being activated in his third house throughout that cycle when it was in Leo, and finally culminating when it ended in Taurus and everything was like finished, like everything was finished. So hopefully he won't have to face anything else, but I know he will probably sue for defamation if I'm not mistaken. So that's what's rumored anyway.
Yeah, and hopefully he has a good outcome. And adding to, the pressure he may feel to have a certain image, or maybe, past challenges he has had with accepting his full self, that's also reflected in his Saturn being retrograde. So a lot of people that have Saturn retrograde in their natal chart can be very hard on themselves, or could have had like maybe not the greatest role models growing up. And, Ricky Martin, before he became Ricky Martin, he was part of that boy group Menudo for, most of his teenagehood and even as a preteen, and who knows what kind of influences he's had there. There's a lot of things that have come out about what the boys in that group went through.
Yes, about the abuses,
Yeah.
physical and otherwise, allegedly, that they had been suffering.
Yeah.
And then the pressure, not only from the fans, but also like, because they were a big deal. Like they were like, that was the thing in the 1980s, and especially in the Hispanic community, it was very popular. It's something that now we see and we're like, oh, we're not crazy about any musicians like a lot of people were in the 80s and 90s, at least not from my understanding. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then on top of that, Chiron, Ricky's Chiron, which is the asteroid of inner wounds, is in the sign of Aries in the 10th house. So Aries represents the self, your own individual self. And a lot of people with Chiron and Aries tend to have a hard time accepting who they really are or asserting their identity. And then on top of that, his Chiron is in the 10th house of being in the public eye, of ideal career. So his inner wounds around his true self was destined to manifest in how he's viewed in the public eye. But then let's also explore how Ricky Martin may be in relationships. So I think based on everything that has happened recently, the news that has come about with these allegations, one can wonder, is Ricky Martin a faithful person, or is he really this like philanderer and, sexual assaulter possibly? I think his chart's very interesting. I think overall he's faithful. Like he has some pretty good Venus aspects. Venus is sextile Mars. So Venus is the planet of love. Mars is the planet of desire. And they're flowing pretty well together in a good aspect of a sextile. So he probably does well in love and attracts it and probably enjoys it. He has Jupiter, the planet of luck, in the 7th house of relationships, according to the Placidus house system. So that brings a lot of luck with romantic partnerships, potentially. And, it took him a while, until later on in his life, but eventually he did get married and now has a family with his husband. And then he also has his Venus in good aspect with Saturn. So Venus, again, the planet of love. Saturn is the planet of structure and responsibility. So love and responsibility go hand in hand for him, and that can make him, faithful in relationship. But just because one is faithful in relationship doesn't mean that has to be a monogamous relationship. And if you want to know more about our thoughts on that, definitely check out our modern dating episode, where we go further into, our thoughts on relationship and the astrological implications of that. So Ricky Martin's North Node, which represents his soul purpose, is in the sign of Aquarius, and it's in the 8th house. So Aquarius is the sign that represents philanthropy, but it can also represent being unconventional, being a little bit different from the societal norms that are established. And the 8th house represents, I kind of call the 8th house like the kitchen sink of astrology. It's like all these things: death, taxes, shared resources, psychological state. But the 8th house also represents sex. So, an interpretation of his North Node is that Ricky Martin's sole purpose is to be open to being open in his, in his sexual life and sexual endeavors. And, that could happen in the confines of having unknown affairs, or it could happen in the confines of him and his husband having a very committed relationship, but allowing openness and being on the same page as to what that is.
And I would also add to that, because it's North Node in Aquarius. Aquarius also represents self, justice and justice for the people. So it could be that in his journey coming out, being someone who's transparent about his sexuality, he's allowed others to feel empowered to do the same. Really, his needs in his life, his exposure and his prolific position in life has allowed a lot of families either to heal from the experience of, let's say, having a child that is gay or a child of the LGBTQ community, but also having that child who a lot of them have been, ostracized from the community, kicked out of their homes, had a lot of controversy within their families, whether it's gossip or, otherwise, help them to also accept themselves. So, his role in this life has allowed so many people to live free and finally live authentically. So that's really, I love North Node and Aquarius people, because they're really here to help us all see better for ourselves, no matter what house it's in. So
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I can also relate to being in the Hispanic community and kind of seeing behind the scenes how over the years, it's getting better now, but definitely growing up, I kind of saw firsthand that people of the LGBTQ community, especially men, aren't as accepted for their sexuality in the Hispanic community. And I think with new artists coming out that are more fluid in their approach and how they express their masculinity. I mean, an example is Bad Bunny, which I'm like so old school. I haven't gotten into him until recently, but he's an artist where like he's very fluid in how he expresses his masculinity. And like Ricky Martin was sort of like one of the first Latin artists that I can recall that really was doing the same thing, but wasn't able to be open about why he was expressing himself the way he was until, years later. So he is, I'm sure, an inspiration to people in the Hispanic community and just people in general that want to be true to themselves, whether it's in regards to their sexuality or just being true to themselves, period. And that really shows in Ricky's Vesta, which Vesta is the asteroid of focus. So his Vesta is also an Aquarius and it's in the 9th house. So, part of it, his focus could be in being open about who he is or allowing other people or encouraging other people to be open about themselves. And the 9th house relates to sharing your message in a sense of like sharing your life philosophy, learning, teaching. So a big focus of his life could be, sharing his journey of how has been able to be his true self and encouraging other people to do that in their own lives. But in regards to freedom in relationship and freedom in love, I think that's something that Ricky probably needs. Who knows how that manifests in his day-to-day life. We don't know him on a personal level. And as a disclaimer, all our celeb astrology episodes are for entertainment purposes only, as Stella likes to mention in all our celeb astrology episodes. So this is all for interpretation, discussion. It's, we don't know these celebrities, but, our interpretations tend to come true. So take it all with a grain of salt and, and take it all in. But Venus, the planet of love for Ricky, is in the sign of Aquarius as well. So again, another instance of Aquarius. So that probably makes him be a lover of people and wanting the best for society. But it could also mean that when it comes to how he approaches love, there needs to be like a sense of freedom or a sense of friendship with his love. And Uranus, the planet of the unexpected and also the planet of the unconventional, is in his 5th house of love. So again, kind of adding to that potential need of having freedom in love and relationship. Uranus is in the sign of Libra, and Libra is the sign of relationships. So again, kind of combining that approach of freedom in relationships. And then on top of that, the sign on his 7th house of relationships is Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is another sign similar to Aquarius that involves exploration and freedom in a sense. And that sign is on his 7th house of relationships.
And also, I just wanted to add with that Jupiter, I believe it rules Sagittarius, if I'm not correct. Am I right?
Yeah.
It rules it.
Yeah.
Jupiter in the 7th house specifically is also indicative of multiple relationships. So it's whether it's a plethora, like you are in a polyamorous situation, or you have multiple relationships that are important throughout your life, Jupiter being there really expands on on not only the luck, but the amount of love that you receive. So it being in that house also indicates someone who could be famous as well, or whose contracts could be negotiated to their favor, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think where the tricky part can come in is not so much whether he is in a monogamous or non-monogamous relationship. I personally don't think that's the issue. I have a feeling based on his chart that whatever the case may be, he and his husband are on the same page about it. And it's up to them how they approach their relationship. Where the trouble comes in my opinion, is that I think Ricky Martin, based on his natal chart, is the type of person that could easily be taken advantage of because he is so open and he is so trusting. And unfortunately, based on his natal chart, he will attract friends because people are attracted to him as a being, but he will also attract hidden enemies and people that don't look out for his best interest. So one indication of that I saw when I was looking at his chart was his Mars in Pisces. So that can make him, very sensitive, very sympathetic to other people, but it can also, because of those qualities, attract people in his life that will take advantage of his sympathy and receptiveness. So who knows what kind of people he's attracted that decided to take advantage of whatever situation Ricky is in his love and relationships. And then also Ricky's Saturn opposes his Neptune. And these two planets, in my opinion, to me, they seem kind of different. Like Saturn is the planet of structure and responsibility and keeping to the status quo, in my opinion, like kind of doing right by yourself. And then Neptune is a very nebulous planet. It's a planet also of deception potentially. So they kind of oppose each other in his chart, doing the right thing, opposing what deceptions are out there. And so that can also lead to instances of Ricky being deceived potentially by other people or even deceiving himself in a way. So I think that's really where the trouble lies in why this, I guess, mini scandal, like it didn't even become like a full-fledged scandal, but that's probably what led to the scandal more so than who Ricky Martin is as a person and whether he's a good person or not.
Yeah, and I definitely want to add to that with Mars being conjunct his moon, his emotional life is really connected to that deception. So, the illusions, even the fact that they're all in the principal houses, the first, the seventh, and the 10th, they're all connected to a certain degree where his illusions, Neptune, are connected to his fame, Mars and moon in the 10th house, are connected to the fact that he needs structure and he's always doubting himself in that structure, or he has a lot of anxiety about the structure around his life or what he should have to protect himself. And so sometimes people slip through the cracks because his emotions, moon, are getting distracted by his fierce protectiveness of Mars. So, you're kind of like in this place where Pisces is very open and very flowy, but all of these planets that are very constricting are kind of, either in square to it or, the planets are inside of it, like Mars inside of Pisces. It's a really hard aspect to have. To be honest with you, Mars in Pisces is someone who they plainly see the outside world as corrupt. So there's a lot of issues around whether or not this person is helping me or not, or am I actually helping this person, or should I help this person, or you're being drained by other people's energy because you're just so open to supporting others. And then when it finally comes back to bite you in the, it's like, well, I should have known better, and I should have done better, and I can't trust anyone. And this is why I can't trust anybody. And it's like, it's a self-fulfilling cycle because you have Mars in Pisces, so you trust too much, but then you say you can't trust anybody because they fulfilled the Mars in Pisces prophecy.
Yeah.
Like, it's too much.
Yeah. And then adding to squares and tough aspects, Ricky unfortunately has some challenging aspects when it comes to his midheaven. So the midheaven, for those that are not aware, is the line usually on the top of a natal chart, if you've looked at your natal chart, and it represents how you're seen in the public eye. And so Ricky has his Mercury opposing his midheaven. So an interpretation of that, in my opinion, could be, sometimes communications and the news that's going out there could be opposing how he wants to be seen in the public eye. And then also, he has his Neptune square his midheaven. So Neptune, the planet of idealism, but also of deception, is in challenging aspect to his midheaven. So there's always going to be like potential like disillusions over how he wants to be seen in the public eye and how he's being portrayed in the public eye. And Stella, it's interesting that you brought up squares, because squares are a big part of Ricky's chart. So Ricky has 2 T-squares in his natal chart. So for those that are not familiar, a T-square is literally when at least 3 planets make a T shape, hence the name T-square. So you have like 2 planets that are opposite each other, and then those 2 opposing planets are each at about a 90-degree angle from a 3rd planet, creating a T, if you can visualize that. So Ricky has 2 T-squares, and both T-squares involve his 4th house of home and family and emotions, his 7th house of relationships and partnerships, and his 10th house of his career and how he's seen in the public eye. So those aspects of his life are always and periodically going to be at odds with each other, or may require balance from Ricky. And kind of we've seen that, you know, the 4th house can also represent hidden light, like what you keep hidden, like your privacy and all of that. And so we've seen, over the years, him having to balance what's private in his life, what kind of relationship is he in, but also like his just natural ability to be in the public eye, and that being a big part of his career. And so with any T-square, there's always an area of balance. So basically, you've got the bottom of the T, and the opposing side of the bottom of the T creates a cross, and that brings the balance. So with both of Ricky's T-squares, his area of balance is in the 1st house of self and assertion and all of that. So it's very important for Ricky Martin to be assertive about who he really is and his true identity, and to stand up for himself, whether that means standing up to the people in his life that are not looking out in his best interest, or standing up for his true identity. And I think he's been able to do that in recent years, and hopefully he's able to do that again with, this unfortunate mini scandal that has occurred in his life. But a challenge with him in asserting himself and having that balancing act in his T-square is the fact that his Chiron, his inner wound, is in Aries, which is the 1st sign of the zodiac. So being assertive, taking initiative, being true to himself, that's something Ricky Martin will need to do time and time again, but it will always be a little bit difficult for him. It will always be a healing process. And as years go by, he will hopefully, if he's doing it right, shed those wounds layer by layer, shed the scar tissue layer by layer, so that he can continue to assert who he really is.
Yeah, and there's just so many different things going on in his chart. And I would say, like, right now, Uranus being in his 12th house is adding to the aspect of, questioning, like, what is his future going to look like? What is he going to do with his music career? And he's going through a stage where he's been sort of hiding from the public, or not really hiding, I wouldn't say, because he's been doing a lot of philanthropic work as well. Which is also 12th house energy as well. So, it's really interesting to see how the new, transits that are happening right now, whether it was Jupiter over Chiron. So it's kind of like, and Chiron also being in the same house as Jupiter. So, that was what was going on in July as well. And it was like hitting him right over, Chiron at 9 degrees. And it was like, okay, what's about to explode? How is his image going to be affected? Is he going to face the demons of his past, and maybe some of the actions that he's taken be reflective of them? 11th house has a lot to do with your friendships and your connections. Where was it his friends that convinced this person to do this? And now he has to reevaluate who his friends are, who his enemies are. And it's been a lot of transits that are difficult, especially Jupiter over Chiron, North Node and Uranus in the 12th house, Saturn going over his North Node as well. So it's like, it's so many different aspects going on in his charts that are affecting him. But I would say, since, Uranus will be transiting into his 1st house, Saturn will be leaving Aquarius soon and going into Pisces, it might be a time where he sort of rises. You know what I'm saying? Phoenix rising type of energy. Really, Saturn going from 9th to 12th is about transforming not only your own belief system, but also transforming how you effectively help others in your career. So he might just transition and do all philanthropic work after this, and really use his voice to help others, whether it's in the LGBTQ community or in general. I think he's worked with Amnesty International, if I'm not mistaken, different, philanthropic organizations that he can help support as well. So, hopefully this doesn't affect that aspect of his life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there's a lot of indications in his chart that show that he's meant to be a musician. In this case, his music is through his voice and all of that, but he's also really meant to be a humanitarian. And for anybody that wonders whether Ricky Martin's humanitarianism is just something for publicity or if it's real, I mean, it's just so obvious that it's real. And there's different indications in his natal chart to show that this is such a huge area of his life. His Vesta, the asteroid of focus, being in an Aquarius and the 9th house, but then also Pallasathene, the asteroid of wisdom and creativity, being in the 12th house, which the 12th house is very much about giving and being compassionate and helping others and almost being a martyr for others. And then on top of that, Ricky Martin has a mystic rectangle. He basically has at least 4 planets that create a rectangle in his chart. And they include his moon in Pisces, which adds to his compassion and his emotional drive to help others. It includes his Mars in Pisces, which adds also to his compassionate nature. And Pisces is a sign that's very much about being compassionate and being like a giver for other people, for better or for worse. It's probably put him in some hot water, but it's also helped a lot of people. His Pluto in Libra, which Libra is a sign of justice, also includes his Saturn in Gemini, which, could make him good at communicating a message. It could make him be hard on himself as well, but it could also have good qualities to it. And Neptune in Sagittarius. Neptune in Sagittarius, when you mix that idealistic planet of Neptune with the philosophical sign of Sagittarius, it leads to characteristics of really wanting to fight for a cause and really wanting to share a philosophy and really wanting to learn to then help others. So that being somebody that gives to society is such a big part of who Ricky Martin is. And he's been able to do that over the years, but because of his music career, he probably hasn't been able to do it to the full extent that he would want to. So maybe this will be the next stage for him of evolving more as a philanthropist. And it'll be interesting to see if he does that, if he uses that potential that he has in his chart, and if so, how that looks like, because I think if he does, he would create great change in our society.
I mean, he has already with just coming out and everything else. But I just want to say, whether or not this is true, because I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, obviously. But if it's not true, especially if it's not true, anyone who has Saturn in the 1st house at 0 degrees, like, I wouldn't mess with them. Like, I'm just throwing it out there for anyone out there who's doing this to Ricky. Like, don't mess with somebody who has Saturn in the 1st house, because that is like resilience 101. He will wade through any crushing issue. He will get through anything. He's especially in Gemini, he can see both sides of the issue, and he can see any number of paths that he could take with it. And then he's got Jupiter in its own house in Sagittarius, and it's like even more luck when it comes to legal issues, when it comes to, let's say, debts that he's going to have to collect on, and not really debts like, it's more like those emotional debts. Like, he can lean on people to help him find the right lawyer. He can find the right person to partner with. He can, rise again like a phoenix from whatever controversy comes his way. And that is sort of like the theme throughout his life has always been, like, whether it was transitioning from Spanish to English music, or transitioning from being a person who was always questioning, everybody was always questioning his sexuality, to fully embracing his sexuality and just being present and able to help not only himself, but being a voice for others. He's never been somebody to let something hold him down, other than protecting himself to prevent others from bringing him down. So, very cautious person, very resilient person who's really going to see it through regardless. So, defamation lawsuits are coming. Let's call that what it is.
Yes,
especially if it was something he can easily prove.
Yeah.
He can easily disprove, from receipts. Like, he Saturn in the 1st house in the sign of receipts, Gemini. Like, I got receipts, I got proof, I got evidence, I have the knowledge, I know what I'm talking about. My Gemini's out there, like, you're always coming up with your answers out of nowhere. People like, how do you know so much? That's exactly the same energy that a Saturn in Gemini is going to have. Like, I'm going to prove it, I'm going to work through it, and I'm going to have everything possible to put all my ducks in a row so that I can bring this person down. So, good luck to you, whoever you are,
Yeah.
because it's really hard to see. Like, first, it's hard to see if he's, a bad person in general. Because, like, I'm trying to see, is Neptune in the wrong place? No. Sagittarius are generally a good sign to have Neptune in. Pluto being in Libra, even then, it's like he weighs everything out. His emotions are about helping others and about being outwardly focused. So it's kind of like, is he going to do the same thing that maybe was done to him, or is he going to be vindictive? Even that is questionable. Is he going to sue you for defamation, or sue the person who did this stuff for defamation? Probably. Because his image is the most, like Mars and Moon in the 10th, his image is the most important thing. So above everything else, I think he would sue for defamation, allegedly, if this is all happening, because he wants to protect his image and his good name. So, let's see what happens. Let's see.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, you heard it here first. Like, if the defamation suit happens, know that, it was predicted on the Astro read. So, I mean, I think
good results.
Yeah.
Good results predicted here. Like, don't mess with Ricky Martin.
Yeah. He's a nice guy and he appears that way, but he's not somebody to mess with. And overall, he's a good person, and, poor Ricky not poor Ricky, poor whoever is, kind of shaming his name, because they have a lot coming to them. But I think that pretty much sums up Ricky Martin. When I was getting ready to analyze his chart, like, I didn't know what to expect, because I grew up liking Ricky Martin. I found him corny some years, I'll be honest, because I was just like, I was like,
were those the cup of life years?
Maybe it was like living the la vida loca, like on the radio all day, every day years. I was like an emo kind of, annoyed preteen / teenager. So that's really my fault. But he's always had this image to me of like, he's a nice guy, like regardless of anything, he's a nice guy. So when this all came out, I was just like, what? Ricky Martin? Like doing this, all of this stuff, not great allegations. So when I went into his chart, I was wondering, okay, am I going to be disillusioned and see the real dark Ricky Martin, or is he the Ricky Martin that like we know and love? And I mean, I think, for the most part, he's the Ricky Martin that we know and love, like who we see, even though he keeps a lot private. And I think a lot of it is probably just his family and the people in his life that he wants to protect. The person that he is, that he portrays, this philanthropic, nice guy that likes to dance and sing and is charismatic. That's Ricky Martin, with probably some surprising resilience sprinkled underneath all of that, right? So some people may think, oh, he's a nice guy, I'm going to take advantage of him. And you can do that to a certain extent, and then you're going to get burned, with Ricky Martin's resources, people that will have his back, because he attracts a lot of support based on his natal chart and also his resources. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops, if it develops, if it leads to a defamation suit. So yeah, that's kind of my take on Ricky Martin. I'm glad to see from his natal chart that he is the good guy I thought he was.
Yeah, and definitely follow us, not only on Instagram at Bellastar Astrology and at Astronatic, so that, because we always periodically give updates on, whatever things that we were analyzing, a few months from now, probably when North Node enters the 11th house in Aries, we're going to have some updates about Ricky Martin and his, maybe a new album, maybe a new philanthropic adventure, maybe a pending lawsuit, dropped, whatever situation happens after this. And hopefully it'll all turn out well, not only for him, but just like maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe there were some issues, maybe there was a bad influence that maybe told this person to do this, to maybe take advantage financially of him, because there was an extortionist type of energy around the situation as well. At the end of the day, we only wish well to everyone. And, this is the Ricky Martin analysis, and hopefully everyone has gotten the information that they need from this to feel a sigh of relief that their dreamboat is perfectly fine. He's a nice person astrologically. Don't know in general.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. We look forward to the next one. And in the meantime, take care.
Yes, please like, subscribe, and follow us. And most importantly, we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week.